All right, so this is another episode of ours that kind of got lost in the mix at the tail end of what we are kind of calling season one. So the information that we're talking about is a bit dated, but the conversation's still great. And actually, we had such a great time with Alex that we are bringing him on again. Him and I are probably going to start doing a regular segment with him as a co host. Ironically, compared to the last episode that I uploaded, Matt and I mentioned kind of in passing that for our chats and most of the deep dives, we won't get into very like political or current event topics very often. But with Alex, we talked about a lot of current events, and Alex challenged kind of like the way I think about some of the things, and we have like a really good, I guess, kind of balance as far as like give and take, push and pull kind of thing. So the content with Alex will probably have a lot more kind of current event or like political elements to it, but the stuff that Matt and I do will remain for the most part. At least the chats probably won't have anything in it. Some of the deep dives, we want to do like economics or what is money, like that kind of stuff, and to some degree, you're going to get into the weeds a little bit. But I want to apologize for kind of the dated information in this. Um, I argue a little bit with Alex. I just want to put on record that as the events played out, he was right compared to my take on it that I kind of talk about. So just want to admit that on the record. So hope you enjoy it. Had a lot of fun. Looking forward to doing more together.
Sava Studios presents the Metametheus Project.
I just bought another copy because I lost my original copy of the Grimoire for an Apprentice Wizard.
Okay.
Don't know if you've read that one by Oberon Zell Ravenheart.
No, I haven't.
It's more of a practical book because it's kind of the way he describes it is if there was an actual textbook for Hogwarts, that's what the book's supposed to be. So it's meant for like high schoolers or like college level kids,
Okay.
or you can do it like as a family with younger kids, and it runs through like what is magic, what are like the different practices, what's the history, what's real, what's mythology, and then it has like different curriculum for like white magic, brown magic, green magic, and like the green magic's like herbalism. It's like, okay, go out and learn a plant and plant it in your garden and make a tea out of it or make an extract. So brown is animal magic, so go to a zoo like on a regular basis or go to a farm and try to like build connection with an animal. It's like these cool practical, I don't know, experiment things. So I'm going to be doing it with my wife and son to, I don't know, I like magic stuff. I just bought the Hermetic uh tarot deck, the Hermetic Kabbalistic tarot deck.
Mhm.
So I'm into
So
that
cool.
stuff.
Yeah, I dig it. Got. I really like the adventure subscription packs. I haven't done many of them. Like they have a romantic one and one just for friends and solo adventures. But it just comes with a book and you scratch it off and it gives you a new one to do. And I've got one that I wanted to do with my son when he gets a little older and I'm pretty excited about.
That's
Nice, yeah. And
cool.
I don't know if
I've
you were
never heard
on
of
Matt when he
those.
mentioned that he's got the D&D set next to him.
So I've
Excellent.
got
This pleases me.
this is the I can't remember which edition this is, but I was pretty stoked about it. But,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, with all the
I mean,
sexy
yeah,
art. Yeah.
exactly. Fifth edition, but you know what I mean.
Yes. But
Yeah,
like Skyrim, it's the, super holy shit anniversary special
yes, hmm
112th release. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I could go off on all they do with video games and things like that. It's weird because I don't play a lot of video games, except I just got Baldur's Gate 3.
I've heard that's
But
pretty good. I've heard that's as D&D as it gets as far as video games go.
yeah, it's pretty incredible. Skyrim is probably the closest thing I've played before it. And then the Pathfinder game I've tried, but it's a little hard to get into. Steep learning curve.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. I don't
But
know. Skyrim has, I don't want to say wasted because that's such a negative connotation, but I've put a lot of hours in that I could have spent doing potentially more productive things. Yeah.
Mhm.
The way you pitch it to me is it's like being in a fiction like thing because the world building's so immersive.
Yeah, with the
Like, I
Elder
play
Scrolls in
Diablo,
particular.
but-
Yeah.
Yeah, because I play Diablo, and that is literally just hack and slash. Like, there is a story; it's kind of cool, but there's no depth to it in the same way there is with Skyrim.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
reading an article from one of the devs of Baldur's Gate 2, and he said that the people that they want to impress with like their world building is like 0.001%. Because if you can do that, if you have the person who you never would have expected to find this little Easter egg, and they find it, it's perfect.
Nice.
I love that. That's like, do you read? I know you said fiction. Is fantasy a big part of that?
Mostly fantasy, I would say.
Okay. Are you a fan of Pat Rothfuss, the Name of the Wind, and those? Okay, because I've seen many interviews with him, and I can't wait for Brandon Sanderson to finish his series as well. And but I've seen many interviews with Pat Rothfuss where he likes layering, literary elements and clues and things like that. And, I've seen him talk about how, they're never going to find this one. And then he reads on a forum. It's like, oh, those little shits. Like, it's almost a game.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a game that we're playing with him. I feel bad for him. He's got a rough road ahead of him, whatever the case. People are so mad.
Yeah, they can. I joke about it, but like I'm in his corner. Like, take your time, Yeah. Like,
yeah, but like just the way he just peppers things in, it's breadcrumbing is what I call it, and because there's just a scattering of things that are just so innocuous, and they just scratch this little itch, and it's enough to where you can just get over it. You're like, oh, that's kind of cool, but it just keeps going deeper. Scott Lynch is another who does that. One of my favorites is The Lies of Locke.
Oh, that's right. His is really good. I'm a huge fan of rogues, like the rogue class in D&D. I love playing those, and literary rogues. I think it's because I fell in love with Zorro as a kid.
I love Zorro.
Yeah, just the swashbuckling, Spanish ninja,
Yeah.
And those characters are just so much more interesting than most others because they get to live in the gray area.
Yeah, there's an inherent duality that comes with, just superheroes in general. But like Zorro and Scarlet Pimpernel, they have kind of a timelessness. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, as long as there's order, because there's order and chaos. Those are the big forces, at work. And then there's just everyone trying to live their lives in between. Right. And the rogues, they dance in the rain of it.
Yeah. Very cool.
There's that joke where it's like the wizard asks the rogue, like, hey, do you have like a human skull? Like, I need it for something. He's like, okay, you just can't ask why. He's like, what? He's like, is that fair? Sure. Pulls out like 12 of them. He's like, okay.
You don't want to know the answers necessarily. Fun.
Oh, it's so much fun. And I don't know, they just have some of the most personality. Like, not to talk about Skyrim for 2 hours straight, but my favorite NPC in that game is Delvin Mallory, who's just he's a Thieves Guild NPC, but he's just got a cool voice. He's like a minor major character in that guild.
Okay.
He's like a quest giver, and he's just got the coolest. He has that like Jason Statham kind of voice going on. Yeah. And he just gives out quests like this, see? And here's what we're going to do. And just, it's just...
I feel like every nerd is a sucker for that voice, like, range.
Absolutely. It's so much fun.
It's good drama.
Yeah.
It was doing really well.
Yeah. And even, the roguish characters, like Michael is really, I am too, but Michael more so into Sherlock Holmes, who is, I would argue, a roguish type in his way.
Yeah, but with the gray zone thing.
Yeah.
Well,
and just like there's
argument for the roguish type. This could obviously be considered other things, but when you put it down, like why would you say that the roguish aspects are more interesting or more key to him?
Let's see. Well, I'm thinking, so one typical trope that you find in storytelling with these types of characters is rogues always seem to have there's always seeming to be a romantic interest or like a foil of the opposite gender. I forget who Sherlock's is. It's
Adler?
Is that Irene Adler, right? Or is it
Irene Adler?
Yep.
So like she and there's always this like chess match that sometimes they're not aware is going on, even, and just like they get outwitted or outsmarted or betrayed, that kind of thing.
I don't know. I've never made this of that. I don't know. I've never made this connection before, because Batman is clearly like a character derived from the Sherlock archetype. If Sherlock was super rich, like, he'd be Batman, right? Bruce Wayne. Batman falls under the rogue category. So it's obviously in there. I feel like that's a good way to show that you can extract that if you let him fight crime as well as solve it, he would.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But he's a very physical character. Like he bends the fire poker in like his first story. It's just very impressive, but he kind of chooses to not be.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's good. It's good character development because you got like what most people would call a dump stat, like in the strength. Like you don't need this with what you're doing.
Yep.
And it's just like
Yeah. And I mean, they're just the most fun characters, the trickster, the rogue, those people, because they make things happen. If you know anything about Norse mythology, the Nordic mythologies, stuff only happens because Loki was bored. That's it. Like all the cool tools that they have, Odin's spear, Thor's hammer, Sif's hair, got shaved off by Loki and then replaced with strands of gold because of Loki. Like, all this stuff. Ragnarok is, his fault or his doing.
Sure.
So nothing would happen without the rogue character. Just stirring the pot.
My DM talks about like you need an instigator, because like people just sitting around talking about what to do for 3 hours is not fun. It's not good storytelling either. And
okay, so one of my my tropes is I always bring up Dying 5 because I'm still super hard on that kick. Okay, but so you just started listening to it. Would you consider Phosphorus a rogue character? Because he's an alchemist class, but he's the instigator, right? So like, are you thinking rogue is just the person that plays in that gray zone? Not
correct, because a rogue, because a rogue archetype is not the rogue class necessarily.
Okay. See, I guess that's where I was getting confused. As somebody who's not as into the actual D&D stuff is why I think rogue. I think class, like, you're picking something in a video game, but you were describing it as like the archetype of the rogue, which makes more sense.
Absolutely, yeah, the literary trope, more or less. And there's there's similarities, but they don't have to be the leather wearing thief. They don't have to be a thief to be a rogue. Even though a lot of them, like Jack Sparrow, not the sneakiest guy, but he's definitely the roguish type because he instigates things and he
we say roguish, then it makes sense to me.
Yeah, roguish. We're talking roguish.
Yeah.
All right. Well, always my favorite. Yeah, The Lies of Locke and Lamora really is such a good book, and it's like the main characters are roguish types.
I probably won't read it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it says nice bird asshole, and it's the Scorpion Falcon.
Well, that makes me happy. That's great.
Yeah.
And so this is exactly kind of why I thought this episode would go well, because even just based on just the vibe, I figured we'd have the ability to riff. But to loop it around for listeners, you responded to one of our TikToks where I was pondering about like the need for suffering, that like people have to struggle with it, and you had a great response for like distinguishing the people shouldn't have to like worry about food and housing like as we like move forward as a society, as humanity, but we still need, you know, challenges, things to like suffer for purpose, as it were. So that's how we met you, and I, yeah, like I said, right away I had a vibe, but us all talking would be, we're probably gonna go all over the place. That's why we didn't pick like a thing. Matt, when you were resetting up, I kind of asked a little bit more about his background. It's a degree in psych, right?
Yes, this psychologist, Associate of Arts, Psychology from the University of Utah.
Oh, fantastic. That is, I don't have a degree. I almost went to school for psych. I went for music instead. Much safer choice. but I've always had a great love for that field. And yeah, to say psychology as a hobby, is that appropriate? I always wonder that.
I mean, it is for me. I'm not making any money.
Right.
But like it's fascinating, and I think people who don't understand their own psyches and want to, they culminate towards psychology, and like that's absolutely why I got into it. And I think maybe sociology might have fit a little bit better. I'm glad I did it. Like I am curious as to like how I fit into certain things, and it's always been a sticking point for me. It's hard to find like things that I want to be an expert in or wants to keep pursuing once I get kind of a base level, which I know I feel is silly, but I do have kind of a wide grasp of a lot of things. But I look to real experts in their fields and feel a little bit of jealousy there. But such is life.
No, I think the three of us all feel that quite deeply. So, yeah,
anytime I
the same
realize, yeah, when I see people on like other podcasts where it's they got a career in some like niche psychology or philosophy thing, I'm like, man, I wish somebody would have told me in high school like that was a thing. Because when people said psychology, it was just really generic. I was like, I'm not sure. And when people talked about philosophy, the only career path I saw was you learn philosophy, mainly the history of it, to then write books and then teach the history of philosophy. And I was like, I want to philosophize. I don't want to just do the history of philosophy over and over
you don't
and
want
over again.
Not to be crass, but you don't want to just circle jerk in the field, you know?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Right.
We talk a lot just between us two about how things have been over academicized, especially in like his case with like classical music, because like Mozart was a badass.
He was.
Yeah.
He was
very
nuts.
Motherfucker too.
He was. He really was. Like he has a whole choir piece called "Lick My Ass." It's a real thing. Yep.
Beautiful.
But yeah, like he would not get along with professors who teach him like, oh yes, Mozart. Like he'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah, it's like
absolutely
overanalyzing WAP. Like, who gives a like? Why are you doing this? Like, it could be fun. But
I do follow a linguist on TikTok who went through all the linguistic possibilities for WAP.
Yeah.
It's an example of like weird interest. Yeah, I follow several linguists who just talk about language. The one guy, I wish I knew his name because he invented a dolphin language based on the most common dolphin noises, and like is actually building out like a full vocabulary and grammar for it just for fun. And I was like, this is interesting.
Yeah, it's some Tolkien level shit. I love it.
Yeah, that makes me happy. I love that, man.
Yeah, so it's those weird things. Like I don't know. But you asked kind of how we got. Oh, we got into the podcast thing, and part of the thing we realized, like between the two of us, and where we want to take the podcast with is like every person and every subject is interesting if you just dig deep enough.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
there's like
everybody's got a fingerprint and they've got a story, and those are the unique things.
Or like I always use the example of like a car, because people are like, they think mechanics and stuff. It's like, oh, it's all these gears and stuff. It's like, whatever. I'm like, no, you're running on like ancient dinosaur goo exploding to make wheels turn. Like, that's fucking wild.
Yeah.
We just casually do it all the time. Like, oh, no worries. And then, we're pumping, molecules of, how would you put atoms, atomic, like, particles through wires to make, like, all these lights, all these screens. Like, we're just forcing it, like, to move.
Yeah.
Like, it's...
Oh, yeah. What is it? Magic rocks? Isn't that...
Yeah.
Like, what it boils down to?
Trained rocks until they were smart enough to do math for us.
Yeah.
That's right.
I looked at, like, diagrams and brought up, like, technical specs on computers, and I still don't fundamentally understand how it computes. They're just like, it does computing. And I'm like, fucking how?
I trust it too.
How? Yeah.
Right. It's the same.
Sorcery.
And Michael and I have been beating our heads against the wall in how phonograph records actually work, because it's multiple frequencies coming from one needle point we get it, the groove and the needle vibrates, but like multiple frequencies. Like,
but if you had just a piece of metal and you fluck it, you could get all the frequencies, but you can't get a harmony out of a single point. So how the fuck is it doing that? So this is what we do in our free time.
Yeah.
I like it.
We ask like quantum level questions and just drink a lot
and then read specs on it. One of the last times we hung out, there's
We're great at parties.
I bet.
Usually one or two people gets really excited and everyone else is like, these guys are fucking weird.
I mean, this is my kind of party. Like, any more people, I'm like, oh, fuck this.
Yeah, that's real. That's real.
As soon as somebody starts talking about, sports or like celebrity news, it's like, bro, don't be a killjoy.
Yeah.
There's interesting things to talk about.
I just hope both sides have fun. Have a good day.
Oh, I know. Even when I try to have sports conversations, because I don't know that much about sports, but I'll talk about like how amazing the athleticism is, or how just in sync the teamwork, things that I think people would get into, and a lot of people are just, they like sports because you're just supposed to like sports.
Yeah, I'll talk about football plays like the way you would talk about a military maneuver,
right? Which is what they're for. I mean, that's
right.
Yeah. And that is when I can get really into it. It's like just watching a reel of just like insane plays that you can be like, oh, holy shit, the athleticism that goes into that is fucking beautiful. I don't care what his name is, what his shirt says. There are some that I get into, like the Savannah Bananas. I like the politics behind it, and that, hey, let's bring everybody in, let's make a community. That's so much more interesting to me than the game of baseball. But
yeah,
I distinctly remember I like watching baseball. I think it's like a good pastime. If you're having like a party and it's just on in the background, if you're going out, because you don't have to really pay attention, and every single moment is make or break, right? Like anything could be a home run, anything could be a strike. So it's always kind of intense, but there's so much of it, you're not really worried about missing things. But there was on ESPN, the game ended, and they walked up to one of them. It's like, yeah, so what'd you think about the game? It's like, he goes like, well, we played. And they played, and they played better, and we should have played better, and we didn't, and I guess next time we will.
Excellent insight.
It killed me.
That's awesome. Oh, I feel like if I were a player, I would definitely fuck with reporters a little bit.
Oh yeah,
like, yeah, that was a real close one, but you guys just couldn't nail it. What's your take on that? It's like, the gypsy sold me a goat. I knew I should have bought the chicken.
Yeah. Just like the Ouija board said.
Yeah. This was foretold in the prophecy. I should have known. Yeah.
You make jokes, but there's so many celebrity psychics that, like, not not famous psychics. The fact that famous people tend to have psychics. It's a big thing in Hollywood. Always has been.
It's true. Or Scientology in general.
It gets scary. Fucking, what's his name? Masters or whatever from that 70s show. Just recently got like.
What's his face? He's like in jail forever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time. And it's like one of the things that I try to like focus on is like, don't hero worship. Like, I've got a handful of people that I'm like, man, they seem really cool, but I'm not gonna hitch my wagon to them. Like, Henry Cavill seems like a really good dude. I would be really upset if something came out about him, but it could.
They tried, but it was real muddy because it was like there's other people that were working with the team that are like, that's not real accurate. Like,
and yeah, just that. That's going a little bit off the path, but I think I don't know if it has something to do with how education is handled in, like Hollywood. Like, if you're coming from, like, a lot of them start fucking 8 years old, and like there's definitely not a huge religious community there, so you can't glom onto that for answers. You got to find it somewhere.
That's a good point. I had never really thought of the education of celebrities.
I think that's fascinating. In general. I read I'm Glad My Mom Died, I think, by Jenny McCurdy. I don't know if you've...
I have it. It's on my shelf. It's on my list. Yeah, one of my friends gave it to me, and he said,
excellent.
Yeah. So I will...
Like, growing up in Utah as a Mormon, like, it was powerful. And, like, I know women who have, like, very, very similar experiences. And a lot of actors do homeschooling, and they have these just weird ups and downs. And even if you get into it later, like, it's got to be a bizarre culture, which I have no insight into.
Go ahead, Michael.
I've been thinking about this a lot with the writer's strike, because, like, I sympathize with the struggle against, like, corporatism. That, like, sure, that's fine. But there's all kinds of, like, other strikes and movements happening that get no press. And Adam What's-His-Face is the face of it, and I loved his show. I'm not a big fan of him as, like, a public intellectual.
Sure. The Adam Ruins Everything guy.
Yeah, because he just, like, in conversations, he cannot hold his own. And he has just such a pretentious attitude. It's why I like Carl Sagan over Neil deGrasse Tyson. I love both of them, but Tyson isn't always as good at the building bridges as, like, Sagan was. But the point I was getting at is I've been thinking about a lot with, like, the writer's strike. They're like, yeah, like, you need to, solidarity with us and help us raise money and stuff. It's like, your job is to keep people distracted. So kindly fuck you. Like, that's been so, but that's the whole industry, right? So these people are getting paid millions, and their job, they always try and tell themselves, like, oh, we're storytellers. Okay, so are all the authors, and the authors don't get the press or the acclaim or anything like that. So
you're
the reason you get paid so much.
SAG writers right now as a collective?
Well, just specifically the Hollywood thing is where, like, these are writers for shows, but this ties in with the actor thing, where it's like the industry they're in is distraction. They like to say it's storytelling, which is true, right? Like, good writers write great stories. I'm a big fan of cinema, but sometimes I feel like it just gets ignored, that part of their job, part of the reason the corporate sponsors pay millions to movies and actors and all that stuff is because it's a distraction. Like, it's the circus, right? Similar to the sports, right? It's the circus thing to keep the people engaged and appeased. So on the one hand, it's like, I understand the struggle, like, I do appreciate the storytelling, I love good cinema, but also there's, like, this thing that isn't getting talked about where it's like, okay, but you're still part of the distraction team to some extent. I feel like that doesn't get brought up. And like I said, there's other movements for, like, workers and labor that just don't get any press, and there seems to be, like, this disconnect with the writer's strike of, like, well, we're important. It's like, are you as important as, like, manual laborers and farmers and, like, frontline workers? Like, I feel like the fact that you're getting all this attention and you're happy about it when there's these other issues kind of plays into the like you're disconnected from the world, which is kind of the point of like that Hollywood like lifestyle and being brought up in it. There's this like weird bubble that it puts people in where they get disconnected from the rest of society.
But I mean, yeah, I think that those are valid points. I feel like writers don't really have as much like gravitas and like FaceTime as is being talked about. I can't name my favorite writers. Like I can name my favorite shows, and if I looked them up, I know that I'd find trends. Like Happy Endings is great writers, and Ted Lasso, and what's the new one? Shrinking, and Scrubs. I think those are all like a showrunner and a couple writers that are in there. But I have no idea who they are, which sucks on my part. Like I should probably try to support them a little bit better. But what they do is still important as far as like everybody has their brand of propaganda, and they're putting out, I think, a good brand. The idea of like, hey, let's try to be better. Let's improve healthy masculinity and get it out there so people are like focusing on that. And to say that they're all part of a distraction, that might be the case, but distraction isn't necessarily useless, and it's not just distraction. So when I watch, I can't think of a good one. Say we watch the Barbie movie. Hey, all of these things are fun to look at. Like this is a pretty movie. It has an underlying message that is more than just the distraction. And I think that's important, and it's impossible from here to like weed out, okay, which of you are good propagandists and bad propagandists. Like we've got all sorts of things going on, but like messages are getting out, and I think they're important.
Yeah, so I teach music to a lot of high schoolers. I work with a couple high school bands and have private students and all that. And a big thing that I teach them is in the performing arts of any kind is that performing at its core is you telling the audience how to feel. That is the core of performing. They want to be moved. You're telling them which way to move their emotions and their attention.
Interesting.
And that's on purpose. That's how it's supposed to be. So if it's real art, even entertainment to some degree, but if it's art of any kind, every aspect of it is thought of, is a choice made for an end. So it's what you're saying. I mean, pick your propaganda, pick your poison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think one, just having Adam be the face of it upsets me personally, and that's just a personal peeve of mine. So, but I do think, you're
well, to your credit, Michael. I mean, you want someone who is poignant and able to articulate the needs of the people they're representing, and he has built a career on, exposing the underbelly of whatever he's talking about. But it's always been just him, in front of the camera. He's never talked about the collective necessarily.
Right.
So maybe he's not the best spokesperson for this. He's just famous, and he's known for, peeking behind the curtain and stuff. So
we've got a transition that like the audience needs to make now. It's okay. You've been doing this for a while. Now you're kind of like seeing you out in the wild, and it's very cultivated wild. This is the zoo. Like this is what we want you to see. But I still think that's an important aspect. And like some of the things that they're getting out, they're very well and they're well written. Like that's what they're fucking good at. It's like these points are very articulate, and I feel uncomfortable when I know somebody is manipulating me. And my brother gets kind of the same way, and they're like, well, emotions are involved. You can't just be logical. Like, you don't need to be fucking logical. Like, we feel strongly about these things because they're important. Run with them.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, it moves nations. You don't logic an army into running into a death trap, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, I mean, hopefully you don't emotion them into that.
right, but if you need, if it's do or die,
Mm-hmm.
then you have to do, and emotion is usually the way to survive that.
Yeah,
and, propaganda targets emotion, and even in the good way you're talking about, like changing people's. Yeah, I guess the thing I love about cinema is exactly what you said. I've like lost touch with it because I've been like a little burnt out on, like the Marvel movies and stuff like that, where it's all this just nostalgia cramming, buy goods and buy things. But yeah, but like the Matrix, right? Like change the way we speak about language. Like that term is now ubiquitous in the lexicon. And that was just, it's a piece of cinema. It was a way to get this quote unquote propaganda out. And again, it's the hit, it hits you in your feels, right? You feel that like something's off, that like unrealness, that weird, isolated, neo chosen one type of thing. That now people, ironically, the whole everyone's an NPC thing kind of comes from that that type of thing that was put out into the world, like as far as a cultural art piece.
Yeah,
that movie is so good. But it's and it's a responsibility, like as an artist, as a creative person, as a writer, you have a responsibility to whatever calling, if I'm going to be high and mighty about it, whatever calling you have to try and turn the masses,
like, if you believe anything is wrong with society, and ignoring it just seems, I mean, it's lazy at the easiest, and it's just wrong at the worst. You're seeing a problem and you know that it's wrong, and if you don't call it out, like, just because that's the simple path, then that's on you. If you try and you fail, that's a different thing. But I guess this all gets down to like what you feel about your moral calling or responsibilities. Like, maybe it doesn't matter what we do. Like, if you want to give in to solipsism or like whatever philosophy is, like, none of this matters. Like, I'm a nihilist. Just let it all burn. That's an easy path to fall down, but it's kind of worthless. So
absolutely, yeah. Michael has a video about that somewhere. Is it one of our TikToks?
Nice. I have a couple nihilism ones. Although, so on the note of the morality and the propaganda, one of the things from like your content that I picked up that I'd be curious to talk about, because we haven't talked to anybody on the podcast about this, and we really want to. Communism, and it seems like that should, and maybe not in like the communist, like, I don't know how would you put it, the modern sense of the word, but just the socialism, the structure, the supporting the video you did about, it doesn't really make sense for us not to all get together, make sure everyone's fed and housed like that. I don't know, how is that a hard
like societal communism rather than governmental communism?
So communism, like in its simplest form, is like the stateless, like moneyless, classless society, and I don't know if that's possible. I am not an expert, even though I probably consider myself a communist, because I am very against the idea of hierarchies. And that's also a sticking point, because I was in the military. I understand how important leadership can be, and hierarchies are often, like, I don't know if misconstrued is the right word, but they're tied to leadership. And it's very hard to have movements without leadership.
I have a friend who. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, go ahead.
I got a friend who's involved in communist movements very actively, and the cell that he was a part of, like, he had to leave because of like drama between the people, right? Like that seems to be on the left side. A huge part of it is because of this like rebellion against structures and hierarchies and things like that. It kind of like implodes on a pretty regular basis. The movements just don't pick up the steam, and a lot of the times when the charismatic leaders come up, they're not always the good ones.
Right. Like Mao isn't necessarily a good person. Like, but I can resonate with the farmer who like went up through the military and just like brought people together and said, "Hey, this is the country we deserve to be." Like that's fucking powerful. But the monster he became, or maybe was all along, is pretty terrifying. And that gets back to the hero worship. It's very easy to follow charismatic people. I've had experiences like that in my life where I was like, hey, I trust this person to do this, and I'm going to reserve my reticence. Like I need to like hold on to it because this could really fuck me over. And
yeah, I think scale has a lot to do with that. Scaling, because you can, let's take, I don't know, like I want to go on a diet, and if I don't leave my house, I buy all the food I need, the right types of food, all that kind of stuff. It's all there. I'm doing great. I leave my house where all the other food is, and now it's down to me. Like there's just outside forces on me at all times.
Right.
You can only stand so much. So I assume, once because I like that. Yeah, the farmer who kind of raised up through the military and probably genuinely felt the cause.
Yeah, like.
But then suddenly on the world scale,
yeah, it was crazy. And then like what they did, also crazy. It's just the story or the book that I read was, I think, Three Swans, which is it's a journal. Well, it's written by three women in three generations of women. So the grandmother, the mother, the daughter, and it's just kind of the transition from the last dynasty into communist China. And it was terrifying and fascinating. But that's really the only knowledge I have that I've like kind of taken in, like specifically. So I don't know how accurate it is or how dramatized, but it seemed very true to life. Like it seemed like the people who would join radical political movements in the United States, they did the same thing in China. And I had a long argument about it with my brother, that I made the claim that Trump was a Maoist, not that he is a leftist, but he was basically a fight promoter. Like they're good at the exact same things, and that is hard to differentiate. It's like, okay, if you call somebody a genocidal dictator, it's hard to take that at face value. But
right,
I think there are similarities. Like a lot of people compare him to Hitler, and yeah, you can do whatever you want. Like there are plenty of comparisons to be made between any person, but if you're doing it between political leaders, I don't think Hitler is the one.
I think it was and they, all three of the people we're talking about have in common that charismatic, for the people, type of thing. They're very animated in their speech, all that.
Lenin, so did Mussolini.
Precisely, that's what I'm saying. Is like there's
even fucking Churchill. He didn't have the same like authoritarian thing, but he had the same "I'm the hero."
Well, I mean,
like
I would like the what's the term? I'm blanking now. But like England and the empire it's got its brand that they're pretty good at, and Churchill was on brand.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was definitely what could be considered a nationalist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where and if you objectively listen to his speeches, because wartime speeches are interesting in general. If you listen or read his speeches, they're very inspiring if you're being attacked by Nazis and you're on the British Isles.
Yeah.
If you're just reading it objectively, it's like all of us will die. or else, like you will either win or die. That's kind of what it is, objectively speaking. And that's a little like
that speaks to the soldier in me.
Right.
Like
Because what is it? We will fight them on the what is it? We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the plain. You know, we will defend our isle, whatever the cost may be. And that's pretty like black and white mentality of
which I think I appreciate. Like, you get to a point. Maybe that should have been the line in the sand that happened earlier. Like, we had appeasement after appeasement, and it's hard. It's impossible to justify it giving hindsight, but it's like, where do we need to start drawing these lines in the sand? Because we have lots of people who are promoting these same terrible, awful ideas, and they are granted the idea of like, well, this is a both sides issue. I'm like, no, you're just fucking wrong. Like,
that's a big one. Yeah. So part of the reason I love the fantasy genre is because you get to play with some big ideas and have things we just can't have necessarily in real life. So what I just thought of is, in a few series, it's a general fantasy idea, is you have the world as it's operating. Things are kind of fucked. You have war and, you know, famine and all that. And oftentimes there's like a society or a, you know, just a group that watches. There's always just the observers, you know, because they're either documenting history and oftentimes the story of those things goes, well, there's someone who's in it that just decides, well, we can't just not do something, but it's not part of the order, or, you know, whatever it is.
So this is the Observer in Marvel and in Venture Bros. Ignore me.
Right. Yeah. Or in the Elder Scrolls, like we're talking about, there's something called the Psijic Order, which is like they don't interfere with the world at large. And that's just not, because those are the people, like, you'd think we'd need something like that so that, you know, because all the things we're talking about usually emerge and they show patterns. You know, history, it's a Mark Twain quote, history may not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes, I think is so you have these patterns, and you would think if someone was just generally observing, you could start to see the red flags as they appear. But then you run into the issue of, if they do something about it, they become the world police, and then they can just they become the thing they're trying to stop, in a way.
Right.
So it's almost impossible to wrap our heads around, well, how do we fix these issues, these global issues?
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. Like, I think that fighting the Axis was an absolute moral good, and we also committed war crimes. Like we weren't morally infallible. So how do you, like, and the same goes for looking forward. Like, there's so many decisions that we can make that could just be the end of it, because we've run down this like arms race track that, and like with things like AI, like you get to a point where things start making themselves. Like, we can come up with weapons and things, and we're at a point where it's easier and easier to destroy the world, which is scary. So we need to be better about it in some ways, but also we don't have the history to deal with what we've got going on and what we've got coming up. So it's...
This is one of my hopes for, like, I don't know, the sub elements of the socialist movement. Because the only way this is going to stop is if people, the actual populace, stops letting nations and leaders and 1%ers and all that, like, the masses, the actual populace needs to be like, we're done. Because, like, that's the only thing that's going to stop it. If you keep letting nations be nations and leaders be leaders and greedy people be greedy, they're going to keep doing it because it's always profitable for them.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about, like, the movies thing, right? Like, we've seen A Bug's Life. Like, that story exists. We know how it works, and yet we can't seem to get together, and it drives me nuts.
And my theory on that is because we're all stuck. Maybe not all of us. So many people are stuck on the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, where we're working on ensuring not just having, but making sure we will always have food and shelter and safety.
Yeah.
Because we're just never sure. With it's a renters society, which means evictions can be whenever, essentially. Like, food is getting more and more expensive. Yeah. Like, we're just never sure, even with some financial security. So we're kind of stuck on the bottom of that hierarchy. So we're not even getting to the part where we can influence society. We're working on surviving.
Well, I mean, but we do influence it. Like,
happy times.
Yeah, like, we're talking, and like TikTok has been a big thing for that. I've never seen as many people get like news stories out so quick, and for whatever reason, like, no other like social media has really called to me. But I get on there and I'll get lost. It's probably bad for me, but yeah, like, we're seeing the good that is going around, and we're seeing the discontent that's going around, even if it's discontent that we don't agree on solutions with. And for me, it always needs to be about taking a step back instead of a step forward. And we can literally all come to an agreement on what the problem is. Like, we can all say, like, companies being part of our government is fucking wrong. Like, I think 99% of people would agree with that. And getting rid of that is a big step, and it would be a hard step. But once it happens, you can go to the next thing, and you can agree on whatever this next step is. And even if people say, okay, well, that's not a problem, you can say, well, why isn't it a problem? Because this person's needs aren't being met. And like that is where the debate comes in. Like, you can have these conversations about certain things, and we can kind of like titrate in our values and our opinions. But when we take a step back and everybody gets on the same page, like, that one step is colossal for the world. It's just literally going to change the landscape once we can get everybody to take it. But it's hard. Like, I don't know how to do it. Like, I just know that I'm like constantly trying to say, okay, how do I fall on the right side of history and be ready to take that step when it comes? And I know that's not enough, but I'm trying to be there, and I'm hoping other people are.
Definitely seems like there needs to be better leadership, and I just don't know what the answer to that is. Well, other than education. My fix for all the problems is fix the education system, and the better educated humans will fix the problems.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason, people poo-poo on, it's like, well, you went to college and college brainwashes you into being a liberal. Not really. It just tells you more about the world, and then you realize, we can and should help each other out.
Life brainwashed me into being a liberal.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And
so,
because I always think it's funny that people don't understand that being in the military, it's so socialist. Like, every one of my needs were met. Never had to worry about anything. Like, oh, I need to go on a mission. I can be ready tomorrow. Let's go. And like, that sense of readiness.
Yeah, I got a couple of friends in the military.
I don't have to. Yeah, it's just it's basic common sense. And when people say, well, not everybody deserves that, it's like, you should see some of the people that I served with. They were fucking sacks of shit. And I 100% believe that their needs should be met.
Yep. Even then, like, the only way to get better, if you're a sack of shit, the only way to not become one, it's not through punishment. Like, that's kind of known these days.
Yeah, like, it works for some people, but like, the carrot is also important.
Right.
Well, and if you're in a shitty situation, like, you're not motivated to not be shitty. So, like, first you have to be out of a shitty situation so that you being shitty is noticeable to you, because things will be decent, and then you're the shitty part. You're not just being shitty amidst a life of shittiness. And not even, like, that, it's the things, there's a huge span from, like, abject poverty, even to just, like, struggling lower middle class, where it's like, you have the luxuries, but you're using those just to kind of keep sane through the grind.
Yeah.
But it all feels shitty.
So the entertainment and the look over here kind of thing comes in. Like, sometimes that's what we need. And I think you're right in that, like, popular cinema is getting very I don't know, droll. Like it's very flashy. It's Michael Bayification, or Bayhem is the word. And yeah, like some of these things can take your mind off something for a day or two. You don't resonate with it. It doesn't like change your outlook. But there are absolutely like things that are coming out, productions that are coming out to do that. But they're not just like at the top of the charts. You've got to kind of look for them, which is hard. Like it's hard to be like, okay, now I need to go do research to find the thing that's going to like tickle my brain a bit, and I just want to watch whatever Marvel movie is coming out or whatever.
No, it's true. I mean, Star Wars is like that. It's all becoming kind of
okay. Star Trek and One Piece are grade A cinema. Period. Star Trek is the world we want to live in. It is the closest thing to a utopia that we can wish for. And One Piece, if we're going to talk about like life lessons, has them all. Has the anti-government thing, has the being kind to each other, has all these different, like, you can be yourself and you'll find the way to fit into it. So I'm just going to make the case, Star Trek, One Piece. It's all the entertainment we need. You can leave everything else.
Fair enough.
And then the Lord of the Rings series. There we go. Lord of the Rings for long form movies, and then episodic One Piece and Star Trek.
Lord of the Rings / Dresden Files tattoo. I don't know if you can read it.
That's fantastic.
Subtle and quick to anger. I've got my other Star Wars stuff. You're just checking all my boxes here.
Beautiful. That's awesome. But yeah,
it's almost like you're a kindred spirit.
Right. No, it's really funny. Star Wars especially, I'm going to go on a small tangent, but Star Wars has the potential to be so awesome, and it is in a lot of ways. I'm a fan. But the lore of Star Wars, picture like an inverse pyramid where like it's all teetering on one little like end cap. Whereas like the lore of Lord of the Rings is an actual pyramid where there's so much unseen, and you see the top of the pyramid. That is like the last little bit of the story.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings is interesting because like when you get to the Silmarillion, which I haven't read, but I know of it, it seems like it's
the book of Genesis for Middle Earth.
It's like the Bible, but it's less dense than all the other stuff because it doesn't have the background. Like you get to the point where it's explaining everything, which is really cool, and it's answering a bunch of questions, but it's not making you ask them, which is a really cool place to be. And I don't think most like world builders would ever get to that point. But I like the idea of it, that you've kind of hit bedrock as far as the world thing.
Yeah, I mean, he starts at the beginning, straight up. You know, this is how the universe was created, and then how the world and Middle Earth and all that came about, how all the races come about. A lot of names to remember.
And the philosophical element of the evil in his world doesn't ever seem to really get talked about, but it makes me giggle every time, because existence was sung into existence because the main god made little like aspects of himself. So he took pieces of himself out.
Harmony. He created harmony.
Yeah, by just taking pieces of himself out. And he took one piece, put it over here, and that one piece was singing out of tune, and all the rest of them were like, "That's bad." He's like, "Well, it's part of me, so I'm just gonna let it be." And then that's how everything happened. He's just like, "I can't be mad because it's me."
So I like that idea of evil being the disharmony. It's really cool. I actually took a class at the U. It was just fantasy literature, and the 3 textbooks were the Lord of the Rings books. It was so good.
Wow. That's interesting. That's cool. It's funny because I was just talking. So I work with marching bands. It's marching band season. So and the one I work with here in Wisconsin is they're the state championship one because they compete, and a lot of it is, I mean, if you think about a marching band, it's a lot of individuals performing a show, and they're moving, doing all these formations and playing pretty sophisticated music for what it is. And I was just waxing poetic the other day with them about the difference between conformity and uniformity.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I'm huge on language, not in that I am a linguist in any way, but I just think we want to make sure we're using the right words. You say this word, but I think you mean this instead, that kind of thing. My big one, especially that I use in teaching, is that simple and easy are two completely different words.
Right. It's simple to take an engine block out. Not easy.
Right. Exactly. Right. So the difference between conformity, where you must all be the same, and uniformity, where you have many different individuals coming together to be the same, but like you kind of get the same output, but the inputs are so vastly different, and that's the important part. And this even harkens back to, talks on socialism, communism, all those isms of, I think it's in large part, you're being forced to conform instead of become uniform.
Right.
And that's the difference. And how do you convince people to do that? There's the question.
So I've thought about this in like the differences between the left and the right, because it's very hard for us to group together and like find a single issue that we can, maybe not a single issue, because things like sexual health care is like widely regarded on the left as like, okay, we're kind of a block on this, and it's really when the right tries to pit that against us that they lose. But not everybody cares about the same things. Like we have tons of leftists who are like pro Second Amendment, and like you can't, like, because we recognize that everybody has value, we don't self-sift, and we don't get like a core that can just go in the same direction as a monolith. But when you get people that do that, people who like value churches and institutions, they can kind of go together like as a block, not caring. And like you can kind of divorce yourself from like, well, I don't really agree with that, but we're still like making progress on the things that I care about. And that's, I think one of the things that unites the left is like that sense of injustice. Like that doesn't feel right, but it's a losing battle to think of it that way. So like how do you come up with a secular version of what the right has to offer? Like, okay, this isn't manifest destiny. We don't have the right to win. We have the obligation. We have the moral responsibility to group together and like meet people's needs. And that's something I think we can all group around. But it's hard because, I mean, there's tons of theists on the left, and you've got all these groups that they don't have the same answers, but they start from the same place of wanting to move forward.
Right. It's funny because it's distinctly American, to have all these disparate identities coming together.
The melting pot, and it's beautiful, it's glorious, but
it's also, like you said, it's a fucking just
there needs to be a unifying narrative. That's what's missing. Like that.
Yeah.
There are some, I'd say, contenders that it's just, I don't know. I guess they all require more work. So that's the trouble. Is like a unifying narrative for the left is going to require more of an active participation than just, I have a Bible in my house, I go to church. I maybe even don't go to church. I just involved with church people, right? But like it's such a low barrier for that level of unification, where the unification on the left is going to involve some like intellectual elbow grease for the trouble is for everybody to get onto that page.
There's a lot more skeptics on the left, essentially.
Well, which is why I think that labor is probably the place that needs to happen. It's the only thing that unites us all. So like we're all working, and like I say all, like we've got 1% that aren't. Who gives a shit? Besides the fact that they're making all the rules. So yeah, grabbing onto that is like, okay, we need to support every worker in every field. And like, just because we don't think that maybe they deserve like so much more than whatever anybody else is making, like if we can all support each other, if we can all come together and say, okay, labor is what is uniting us. Even though I don't want my life to revolve around my job, like I can recognize, okay, I want my life to revolve around the people that I care about. And I can care about every single person in a field, even if it's massive. I can care about every single person in the world. I can make my tribe as big as I want it. But we have to train ourselves to do that. And that's the hard part.
Yeah. And it's funny because what you're talking about before was distinctly American. What you're talking about now is pretty Christian. Like,
yeah,
I should care about everybody.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know how, like, the Mormon criteria stacks up against most other Christian religions. I kind of know some. Now I refer to the Book of Mormon as Bible fanfic. But
I mean, it's a good way to do it. We talked to someone who has their degree in they went to Bible college. They have a theology degree, and now they're an atheist. So their whole TikTok platform is deconstruction of that. Most of the Bible is Bible fanfic, we found out.
Yeah.
So don't worry.
Yeah. Was this last episode with Captain Dadpool?
Captain Dadpool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I grew up Catholic. Mm-hmm. I'm Catholic on paper. I'm a confirmed Catholic. And it's all of them have their own special flavor of cult.
Well, and we talked about it then, though, because it's like the core of Christian philosophy was superseded by orthodoxy. So it's like the followers of the Christian philosophy got just murdered.
I didn't get that.
Murdered by the orthodoxy bloc, and that's the whole point. Is it's a political bloc and has been. And even my big peeve that we kind of talked about was that all the like denominations still come from that lineage. They're not from the grassroots movements of the original, like the Gnostics or like ones
Jesus.
that didn't have or the ones that didn't have a name because they're like, we just are good to each other. That's what it like. We don't. There is no. A big part of it was church is bad, right? Like it's community is the church. It's not your church is your community. It's that the community is the church.
Right.
But so basically the level of, I think all three of us would agree, the level of hypocrisy is sickening on so many, just in so many directions.
Okay. But I've seemed right to some people because I've been very critical of the left because of things like the issues they're picking, right? Because this is my thing about the writers' strike, because it feels like it's taken away from the other parts of the labor movement or a lot of the like culture war type stuff. It's like it's important. It's not as important as the labor thing. So the fact that they're allowing themselves to get brought into that fight versus just being like, we're going to solve the labor thing first. Like, we're not going to take our eye off that ball. Because it feels to me like the right is moving it into these other moral and like cultural areas to keep it off the labor thing. And the thing is, even the base of the right agrees with the labor thing. Like the working class is the working class. It is the part that we like all agree on. So I get very frustrated when that's not like actively like these other things come up. It's like those are important. We'll deal with those later. Like let's get people in a good spot first, versus trying to solve these other issues while we're still struggling.
Well, so the way I think of it, and again, we kind of touched on it already, is like we don't have like charismatic leaders like set up in our structure. Like we kind of weed them out and like tamp everybody down. We have a very deep value in the democracy. But what I think is happening, and what I genuinely believe, is because they have that the articulate core of the writers, they're going to be very good at leading, despite not like being a single person, just despite not having like that one figure to look at. Like they're very good. Like they're getting together. They have their group. They know what their messaging is, and that has made it so much easier for these other unions to follow. And I think that's fucking monumental.
Good point.
And just because like
we could really do without, like, I don't want to say we could do without the writing. It's a massive part of our culture. But if they disappeared, people would get by. They would get food. Like things would happen. We would turn almost immediately to like local plays and things like that.
Folk stories and folk music. Fuck yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But just because
support your local Irish pub. Yeah.
But just because they like aren't integral to like life at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy doesn't mean they aren't like pushing us and giving us something that we can like build on. And I think that is really important. So I'm like, anytime I see anything labor related, I'm like, just like blow this up. Everybody see what we can be doing, because yeah, like these people, like we may not resonate with them. We may not have any empathetic connection with like what it is to be a writer in Hollywood, but what we do connect with is like what it's like to not have our needs met. And they want your needs met. They want their needs met, and when they take the step, you can see how to take it. So
but
that's a big one.
A question I've had though is why don't they seize the means of production? Why don't the writers start making more independent studio functions? Right, finding their own sponsors, finding their own money backing, and just doing their own productions.
I think that's a great idea, because right now it's very hard to see why these producers exist. Like they're only fighting against these people that are making beautiful content.
Yeah, and this happened in the music industry. Like a lot of people just go indie now. It's an indie industry.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know a lot about the music industry, but I know that like everybody is trying to leech money out of every fucking aspect of it. So you go to Spotify and it's just disheartening. Like it's, how can you have pure music when you need it to live? Like I don't care what gets put out. It just needs to get out so I can make rent. But like what I've been thinking is like, what if we just crowdsource like our favorite writers and put them on like torrenting sites? Like,
yes.
That would be
or even
like literally
or even
the
YouTube.
cheapest way for that to happen. Yeah,
or
exactly.
Even YouTube. Let YouTube start going against the other streaming services by catering to the cinematic independent audience. That would, yes.
And like A24 is kind of doing that already. Like they've been like granted their pardons by SAG-AFTRA. It's like, yeah, you are completely willing to like work with us, and you've agreed to the not unrealistic things that we're asking for. Make your movies. And A24 has brought out some incredible stuff, like Everything Everywhere All at Once and like The Lighthouse. They're beautiful movies and like thought-provoking, and they're the kind of things that I think people are looking for now that they didn't know. That, like, I feel like you're in the same boat, Michael, and like everything seems like kind of candy, but like some of these things have really, or some of these movies have really interesting things to say, and I just want to listen to them. And
I cried at the end of The Imitation Game. Like, so, like I said, I'm a big fan of cinema. It's my trouble is with Hollywood. So it's this weird thing where they're like, we want in on Hollywood, and I'm like, why? Like, you're asking the evil bad guys to not be evil. Like, just leave. And like, if you have that momentum, put your energy there.
Yeah, the grass is greener where you water it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, so I wanted to bring up, I've been thinking about this the last few days, actually, not the Hollywood strike necessarily, but you guys and myself, we've been talking about a hierarchy of, not just the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's example, but ranking the importance of certain things, of what to pay attention to, and, you know, the workers versus the writers and all that. And it might be better to think of it, instead of a ranked system, it's rather an ecosystem. It's a sphere. It's all just there together, and what part serves, because it's all there at the same time. You know, we can't pause an industry to focus on a different one necessarily. It's just, these are people's lives. It's just not going to work. So thinking of the ecosystem of it is much more important, of what serves the whole human experience, you know?
Well, not being able to pause something is why I think another reason that SAG is a good example of what we need to be looking to, because honestly, we can all do without their movies, like, and it sucks, and none of us want to. But like, it is not a necessity. Like, I wanted this to start when the trains, like, when the train workers were trying to go on strike, and because that would have hurt, and that's what needs to happen. It needs to hurt, and this is maybe a way to like push into the hurt. Like, people notice, but it won't kill us. But it's not the change and growth that I want to see. But I know it's going to be easier for people, and
but the result of them winning is more good distractions. And I know you keep saying that, like, we'll get these stories and this propaganda that, a generation or two down, it'll be part of them. But the system won't have been affected as directly. And the system is digging in the trenches. So they're getting ready for the next big thing. Because they've seen history. They see the movements. Yeah. So it's just...
Well, didn't you bring up A Bug's Life? Like, that's a piece
right, but it didn't do anything. We all know the story, and we still get stomped on by the grasshopper.
I mean, yeah, like, but we all resonate with it. Like, I think there are so many, like, millennials who are like, hey, this is the story. This is, like, our favorite Pixar movie, or this is the thing that, like, started the balls rolling. And then when we talk to the next generation, like, holy shit, you guys are on, like, you know what you're doing. Like, you're seeing all of the mistakes that we made. And like, if I had taken this in, I would have done this, and this. And now, it's now looking back that I recognize some of these lessons I should have learned, that they're not even needing to learn. It's part of them. But I think you're right. There is some, I don't know, like a veneer of you're only getting what the producers will allow. But the writers, like, bad movies don't sell, bad stories don't sell, and good stories resonate with us. So we're going to keep getting Bug's Life and Star Trek and One Piece because people want to hear those stories.
And to, like, a good dichotomy example, like, Disney as a corporation is awful. However, the core team of Disney, Walt Disney's actual legacy lives on in the writers, because Pixar doesn't fucking miss. Like, Inside Out, I have watched close to 100 times. It is beautiful. It is teaching, like, kids, like, how your brain compartmentalizes these different aspects, how to balance them. It is just so good. I thought Turning Red was also fantastic. Like, it's just, we just rewatched Brave again. Beautiful movie. Like, so Pixar doesn't miss. So the Walt Disney legacy lives on in the writing team, the magic of Disney, the storytelling, the folks and the culture and the art. Even in spite of, and they get paid, right? They get their big budgets from the corporate thing. But I want to be hopeful. I guess I'm in my age, rather than, becoming conservative, I'm becoming a bitter liberal, where I'm like, I feel like we should just fucking do something.
Well, I've started to say more and more that a capitalist economy is a good thing. A capitalist society is not a good thing. Like, and I think we just, again, it's my thing with words. Like, you have to separate these things and know exactly what you're talking about. Because most people, like, they just rail on capitalism. It's like, well, no, it's the capitalist society, the capitalist,
I'm perfectly happy to let the marketplace decide anything that is not an elastic good. Or that is an elastic
it's
good.
Not hospitals, housing, food, prisons.
Yeah, anywhere you can put yourself between life and, like, death, you shouldn't be able to make money off of it.
Right, and that's where the society part. Yeah, that's where the society part comes in. It's like, all right, like, different streaming companies. That's a capitalist economy thing. Fine, let the best one win. hospitals competing for, buying your bills and all that, like, that's a capitalist society thing, and that is just immoral. That's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But someone's making a lot of money off of it, and they don't see the people they're affecting. It's all spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm. I read, I think his name's Rob Delaney. His book, A Heart That Works. The full quote is "A heart that works or hurts is a heart that works." But it's about him losing his child, who I think was his third, to cancer in England while he's filming one of his shows. I haven't ugly cried like that in fucking years. But I was imagining what it would be like in America to have somebody come up and say that, like, we're not going to pay for your son's treatment. I can't imagine going on a faster homicidal, like, rampage. Just
right.
Like literally, you want to stand and save this system that is standing between my son living and dying, and you think that I won't just fucking destroy you? Like, it's
right.
It's morally, like, reprehensible that we have things set up the way that we do.
Yeah, and it's even a third party, right? Because doctors want to save people. They're doctors because they want to do it. Nurses want to take care of people. Fucking insurance companies want your money.
Yeah.
Period.
Like, I loved working in the emergency department. Like, one of my favorite jobs. I couldn't afford to do it because it wasn't paying enough. But, like, I've met so many good people and people who are just the best. And, like, there's the two aspects, like, people who are just genuinely good at care and people who are, like, so mechanically minded that they can go in and staple somebody up, and it's so cool. And I just idolize people like that. They're the best, and it's hard to see them get undercut by this system that's just like, hey, you don't deserve to be paid even though you're doing all the work, and, like, now we're not going to pay for the work that you did do. And it was hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk about the the workers' rights, the ground, the boots on the ground, they and the thing is, like, EMTs could strike, but they would knowingly right, there's a whole thing. That's the thing. It's a hostage situation because medical staff could strike, but they won't because it's immoral to do so because people will die.
And we have, like, there have been medical strikes, and they get strike nurses and replacements, or a scab, I guess. But to get to that point, it's got to be bad. And for me, it was easier just like, I know I should be working on a union here. I don't have that in me right now. So it's hard to ask that of somebody because people are going to die. Like, because whenever somebody new comes in, like, they have to learn this hospital before they can take care of people, and it's a big learning curve.
Right, and it's not like you guys can go indie with it.
Yeah,
you can't just start your own.
Okay, here's the thing though. Matt heard me pitch about this. The crowdsourcing thing I've become more and more and more excited about because I feel like a cultural shift specifically for Americans, because it just fits with kind of the way things are going. Because we're trying to make it so that we get most of our support from Patreon. So if you enjoyed these talks, please, just $1. All we ask for is $1, and we just want enough dollar people so we can do this more. And part of the thing is work on other projects. That's why it's called the Metametheus Project, not the Metametheus Podcast. Because I have several ideas to try and crowdfund, like, socialist programs. Because I'm like, if I just get a couple hundred people to just donate $1, right? Like, we could do like not a UBI, but like a random relief, right? Like, we just hand a check to a family in need in a community, or with something like, if we did it nationwide, right? So we have thousands of people, millions of people like all just doing $1 for a single thing, right? We could help like raise the wages for a group by just supplementing the income, like, right, make a Patreon and then have somebody helping organize that to just like send out money to people in like the medical field, right? Just to like do it ourselves, like stop waiting on the government. Just we get together, we pull little piles of money from just a little from each of us, but it adds up to a lot, and then work on these like projects or programs or trying to like fix things. To me, that seems like both it could work, and at least to get the ball rolling. Like, it's not a fundamental fix, but it would be a huge step in the right direction, and it's kind of fun and sexy because people are into that type of thing. So I've been big on that. That's one of the things
Mr. Beast Rainbow Coalition.
Yeah. Yeah, and just get everybody involved in that kind of thing. Like, yeah, how about we just like that's a flex thing. That's a like thing we do now is like, yeah, so like, I support this program and this program, and again, like, if you're doing it at just like $1 to $5, right? You're not asking like for $35 and 20 of that goes to administration. Like, no, like you make real small teams, and that money goes like directly to people needs, like that type of stuff. I feel like there's something there, and once we get ourselves stabilized, because I work at a warehouse 50 to 60 hours a week, and I work a second job. So as we get stabilized and have more time, that is one of the things that we want to do is experiment with like social things like that. So, but I think there's something there to just similar to the TikTok thing, right? Like, we're more connected than we've ever been as a populace. So I feel like we have this opportunity to just kind of start fucking doing shit ourselves.
My pushback to that, and it's not even really pushback, because I agree. I think we should be doing things like that. And that's one of the things that the right does. They constantly are putting money towards their churches, and I think that they donate more, like per person. And that's something that we should definitely be working towards, and doing things like churches that pay back medical debt. Something that I'm really into. But the government is set up to do all of these things much better than we ever could be. And the problem is, like, nobody trusts the government, rightfully so. But the government is responsible to us. So if we want to have a movement to solve a problem, that seems to me like a off ramp on a road trip. Like, we don't necessarily need to go there if we go directly to the location that we need to be by fixing some of these governmental institutions.
It's a lot more fun to support a crowdfunding project than it is to learn all your local politicians and fucking vote.
You're right.
Because I'm thinking practically here, because you're right. That would be a much better fix. That's a harder pitch.
Right. But what about things like directed tax money? It's like, hey, we're just going to take 5%.
Yeah, that was one of the first, like, it wasn't even a podcast episode, but I was with my aunt who is a retired state patrol officer, and we had that conversation when I was in my early, like, full-blown anarchist, like, teenage phase. I was like, why isn't there, like, a list, right? You file your taxes, and while you're filing your taxes, you go, okay, so for the next year, I want 10% to go to military. I want 25% to go to welfare systems. Like, you pick the things, and then it's on the politicians to make a case why you should pick their department, right?
Yeah.
If you want to market, all right, let's make a market for the taxes. I want this for my taxes, and if you don't support, this project, then your tax money doesn't go to it. Because right now it's lobbyists determining what your tax money does.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Sure is.
Things like that. There are so many things that we could do to get people more engaged, and getting lobbyists out of it would be just transcendent. Like, it would be insanely easy to make people excited about the government if they're not competing with billionaires. Because you can say, okay, hey, these are the options. You can send your money where you need it. Like, your roads are bad, send it to infrastructure. You don't feel good about healthcare, let's send it to healthcare. Education, like, everybody agrees that these are the issues. Like, I don't get to send my money to education. Like, I don't get to make that call unless a vote gets put up by somebody else. And that's crazy. Like, it's our money. You spend it how we want you to.
Yeah, that's supposed to be how it works.
And it was, I mean, it was set up with like the Electoral College and how, you know, most of the populace of America at the time of this being set up was less than informed. I don't want to say they were like illiterate and stupid, but just less informed, or just trying to live their lives. They didn't have the time or the attention span to spend on these things, which is why you had the government doing it.
Yeah.
But it's time for a change, right? The populace in general, like you just said, Michael, we're more connected than we ever have been. We're more informed overall. Like, whether we want to or not, we're exposed to world events and local politics and everything. Like, it could change. It probably should, so that it's just more purely democratic.
Yeah. And it's funny because I always argue with people about like the size of the government. Like, yeah, all of us want a smaller government. We all want things to be whittled down and to be handled at the appropriate area. We want cities to handle their shit and counties to handle their shit. And we could get to the point where that is happening very seamlessly and without muddy waters. But like, nobody wants to trust it enough to let that happen. And like, rightfully so. There are people who are actively working against like solving that problem, because that would lose a lot of money for a lot of people.
Right. I mean, look at pharmaceuticals, right? If you cure diseases, you stop making money.
Yeah. And like, how can you make that decision ethically at all? And the answer is you can't. But it still makes people money. So if there's 99 people that do the right thing and one person who does the wrong thing, we have a system that does the wrong thing. And that's not acceptable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And it's funny because, like, to harken back to like very beginning of this conversation, we think of roguish types being kind of out for themselves, more or less, but they're never the ones that are like they're never the ones that are screwing over everybody to do it.
Right.
It's really interesting. Yeah, they're very like, I don't know how. You understand what I'm saying? I'm having a hard time putting it into words.
But tough line to walk, because you want people to root for your selfishness in a rogue, and you can only be like have a positive selfishness if you have like a tight knit community that also benefits from it. That's interesting.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, because otherwise you become greedy, and that is very unsexy. You know,
community focus, I think, is like the big thing, and ironically, our interconnectedness might be hurting that a little bit, because the local community is supposed to be the thing. Back to the words being important. It's the federal government. It's supposed to be the collection of all the little governments. And somehow there was this weird like switch game they played where now everyone's just like, oh, the government, and they think mainly the federal government. So everyone's focused on the federal government, what the federal government's doing. That's supposed to be secondary. It's supposed to be all the local governments, and then the local governments get together in a federation and decide things. And somehow it got like swapped on us, where people stop paying attention to the local stuff, and they're trying to move something they can't move without the local stuff.
Yeah, that's the same thing happened in religion, funny enough.
Policy. Like when you structure things as a states' rights, when it was allowed to everybody, when everybody was allowed abortion, like that's everybody having the right to an abortion or not to have an abortion. As soon as you say, okay, everybody makes a decision, now you have 50 states making a decision instead of every individual. But it's very easy to get that confused, like that idea, like, well, yeah, the decision should be made at the lowest possible level. That's what the individual, like, you can give that to them without like forcing your theology or your like personal opinions. But it's subtle and it works really well because any argument against a state's rights is an argument for bigger government, even though it's just an argument for less clutter.
Truly, man. And there's so much of that.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, I was gonna add that the same phenomenon happened in religion, where you used to pray to, like, or at least, either maybe not pray, but like you were spiritually aware with, spiritually connected with the river and the forest and the trees in the forest, and certain land masses and etc. And that kind of just became, in some parts of the world, just God, the God who is everything and knows everything. And how inconceivable, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, now you're forgetting about your local river, and you're not taking care of the river that you used to have a connection with. So then you have most Miyazaki films are about, most Studio Ghibli films are about this, where you lose connection with what's around you, and things go to shit real fast. And it affects you. That's a cyclical journey. Like, it affects you, the individual, in that you start to feel disconnected and bad, and you're not even sure why. And I think we all feel that more or less these days.
That's fascinating.
So go hug a tree.
Touch grass, hug a tree.
Touch grass, yes. We say that ironically, but man, have you like stood on your lawn or a local park like barefoot lately?
So
like,
okay,
yeah.
So we're switching topics. Fuck grass, because like there's way better options. I'm tired of dealing with my grass lawn. I'm gonna get cloves and mossy stuff. It's gonna be cushiony. It's gonna look like a fairy field.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying too. Is like, it used to be the stuff that was already there that you connected with. You don't force other things. Lawns. The modern lawn is an unnatural element.
That's why they're so freaking hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Gotta force them into place. You gotta colonize your own yard.
Damn, yeah, you said it, man. That's perfect. And also, I mean, and I get the aspect. A lot of people take pride in taking care of their lawns because they take constant maintenance.
Looking at my lawn after it's freshly mowed feels fucking great, and I hate it. I don't want it to feel good.
Yeah, it's because you did a good job on something,
right?
Well, and it objectively,
we don't get that feeling very much,
but it also objectively looks good.
We're so disconnected. Well, yeah, but all of us take pride in doing a job well, like whatever the job is. As soon as we like grasp something, but constantly, and like Mark said the same thing. It's like when you disconnect yourself from the product of your labor, like the finished product, you just lose that sense of accomplishment and pride. And the more that happens, the more you like step back and it falls apart. Like, and now you're just a cog.
Yeah, and Steve Jobs has a clip in an interview where he talks about that, where he's like, the trouble with so many companies is the things that make companies great are the creatives and people that make the product, and then they get taken out of the decision-making process. But also, the thing that drives me nuts is the companies that are the best, even one of them that's people aren't or fans of, but like Apple, Disney, people can say what they want about Tesla and all that type of stuff, but it's focused on the creators drive the decisions. That's why their products kill, like, in the marketplace. And here's, like I said, those are the billion-dollar companies. So when we look at the market, right, when you look at what does well, that's what does the best, period, hands down, no discussion. Even Amazon, which is like the bad boy out of the like group, but his whole thing was customer experience. He was obsessive about allowing like his team to figure out, how do we do this best? Like that was the focus.
And I think that would be a perfect model in a non-capitalist society. Like, we could have the post office do what Amazon does, and if we have Jeff Bezos as the guy, like, hey, we love you, we're going to give you everything you need. You're not going to be a billionaire because you don't need to be. We're going to meet everybody's needs. But like, fucking run with your ideas. We love them. We love this about it. But the thing that we don't love is you making your workers piss in bottles. Like, you don't get to deprive them, like the people, of like the necessities. And when you don't have like a billionaire, you can just funnel that money right back in, and it's immediately better. Like, you can hire more people. Everybody, Like all of these,
which is capitalist. Not to interrupt you, but like I'm reading who is it? Is it really John Smith or
Adam Smith?
Like Adam Smith? Yes.
Yeah.
And that is the definition of capitalism: is you use the capital and funnel it back into the business to make more capital.
Right.
So it is supposed to spread the wealth. That's the whole point.
And Adam Smith's version of capitalism is not one that I am completely opposed to. But it is one that I think most CEOs would be opposed to.
Yeah. And so we've talked about these people, and we're getting more pointed towards the top of these pyramids. I wish I knew this study or if there is a study, but I've heard, this is now just conjecture, but I've heard that most high-ranking people in these big companies, or in any big company, they usually have some form of like they're psychopaths, like some form of psychopathy, where they're emotionally disconnected from others.
So,
and usually that's how you get to the top, is you have to, you start stepping on necks and stuff.
And somebody, I think it was actually a TikTok that I saw, but the statement was made, or the question was asked, is capitalism a moral structure or is it amoral? And at a certain point, it doesn't matter, because if you say that it's amoral and that it doesn't have any moral like judgments and anybody can play in it and it doesn't begrudge anything, any decision that can be made that will benefit an immoral person will like shoot them up, and only immoral people will take those things that will hurt others, but they'll still take them, and as long as the system is amoral, it trends immoral. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, because like we are allowing people to make these immoral decisions and saying, well, that's not capitalism's fault. It is. Like capitalism is incentivizing taking immoral steps.
It's true. Yeah, they're gaming it. It's gamified. Yeah.
But this would be where it might be worth like playing with our words to change things, because you get a lot of press back against people being upset with capitalism, because like he mentioned, like the definition of capitalism is supposed to be the businesses, right, which is the employees.
The
like good capitalism
and
good capitalism is
also
for
private ownership.
paying his workers. Yes, and that, I mean, that's I used to use the term mercantilism, is like the good version of it, where it's like, yeah, it's like a family business. You want to be like, you want it to be theirs. You want them to have pride in it, right? Like, you want to own your house, right? Because it gets a little weird when it gets super communal. I do think that's where it should go eventually. Back to my like Star Trek is the goal, but I think there is like a middle step, and I'm okay if we need to skip the middle step. It just doesn't. That seems dangerous to try and tear it all down and hope nothing bad happens, because that's never happened before. But there's I usually use the term corporatism is the problem. It's the concept that there's this organization sitting on top of the business that's pulling things out of the business. So rather than paying the employees, rather than improving the product, rather than expanding the team, the money's getting siphoned to the corporate thing that's leeching onto the capital like structure of the business. So that's usually like the wording I use to try and like pull the two apart, because it gets tricky when we talk capitalism, because these like different definitions based on where you talk about it, who you're talking about, and all those types of things.
Yeah. So how would you remove corporatism from capitalism as a system? Because as I see it, corporatism is end stage of capitalism. Like they may not necessarily be the same thing when they start, but they march towards each other.
No, that does make sense. That's a good point. Because I don't think there is a way to stop that from happening. I feel like
it's a natural progression. They're not sitting there twisting their mustaches.
Yeah, nobody's like thinking about what's the most evil thing I could do. But when you're given an opportunity, and it's like, hey, this will make me $1 trillion, and 6 people will die. Like, now we know what those people's lives are worth, and like, yeah, that seems like a reasonable call. Like,
right.
it's
I
6
can
people.
buy them some real nice coffins. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's one of the things that I think capitalism pushes on us, is that idea of like people have a quantifiable value, which is something that I rally against. But when you get into the corporatism versus capitalism like debate, the thing that I get down to usually is we have this system, we have this economic system that is part of our society, and if we want to be fighting it constantly, we stick with capitalism. Capitalism is something that needs to be kept in check, otherwise it will do what it is doing. It will become corporatism. Whereas if we work on coming up with a system that tends towards taking care of people, hey, these needs aren't being met, and it sends people back down and says, okay, you need to fix this problem before you can advance. That's a good system. That is, it's a good ecosystem. It's forcing somebody to improve before they sprint ahead. And right now we have so many people sprinting ahead that they lose their humanity. It's like you said with the psychosis. Like, there are MRIs that like they show that their brains are different, and honestly, that's not fair to them. Like, they don't deserve to have their brains fucked with because we didn't regulate them as a society. And maybe it's because they had that predilection before, but it doesn't absolve us of responsibility.
And that's one of my personal like philosophical tools I use against people is the psychopath test. Is if you put psychopaths into the system, does it still work? Because a lot of people make systems for like the good people. They'll make moral systems, they'll make political systems, and they're like, yeah, it'll work with all these good people. I'm like, okay, but what about psychopaths? Like, oh, just keep them out of it. It's like, you can't. That's part of the human thing, is these little things pop up. And there are systems that like manage that. Because the thing about like the psychopathic behavior is they're going to want to rise in whatever system. So if you make a system where that rising benefits people, they'll do it because they don't care. That's the point. Like they don't care if it benefits people or hurts people. So if you build a system that allows them to get that like angst out, get that compulsion out, but it helps people, that's the best, because then everybody's working towards that like end. But I feel like it's one of those concepts that people forget to like think about when they're building their like philosophical.
I think that's brilliant. Like, does your system accommodate psychopaths?
Because that's usually it's usually the joke I make against utopian communists. As I'm like, one person who's like becomes a capitalist like ruins the whole system, right? Like, one person's like, if us 5 got together, like, we could make like more money than those other 5 people, and then boom, like, you're right back to it. So somehow the system has to have those fail safes, otherwise that's why you can't have the utopia version of it. It's too fragile.
That's really cool. That's an excellent tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, we think about these things like a lot. We don't have answers, but we definitely think about these things a lot. Because and I have a TikTok about this too of we're all mad at corporations and businesses for their shoot, it's leaving me, the ecosystem policies, their how they treat the world and nature and things. And my argument is, well, okay, if the system is the way it is and you want that to go better, make the green movement profitable, not just morally upstanding, but make money. Because they don't care. They don't care what the moral obligation is, really.
Except they don't have like inherent solar panels. Like, they have the rights to oil, and they have oil, but they don't like, it is a transition. So like rallying against it makes sense from an economic standard.
Sure. And and the energy companies are something to consider separate. I'm talking about just any company, really. Yeah. But you're right. The energy companies are the ones that obviously affect the most with this. oil companies are. Yeah, I mean the BP oil spill is still in my memory, and that was years ago.
Yeah.
Because again, it's in my memory not because it happened, because accidents do happen, but because they blatantly just didn't care. They don't care.
Yeah.
We're sorry.
Well,
We're sorry.
Yeah.
And now we're getting like reports like, hey, we know that this is going to increase the temperature of the planet from the 80s. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Which was now just I'm going to point this out to anyone listening now, and it's the year 2023. The 80s was 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Not 20. It wasn't 20 years ago.
Terrible thing to
40
say.
years ago. Yeah. but just to emphasize the point of like, it's been longer than you think it has been.
Yeah.
And I think the solution with that like profit thing is don't make it profitable for the corporations, just make it profitable. And the way you do that is, again, local. And my example for how this works is the music industry. The music industry loved controlling everything, but then artists started just being like, we're doing it independently. So the music industry still wanted to make money. So it changed. It became a distribution support network, right? So the music industry shifted to support the locals, right? The independent artists. So if you shift to stronger local and more sustainable economies, the corporation is going to be like, well, how do we get in on that, right? And if you make it so that they can't be corporate, it has to be local, they'll find ways to like support the local systems to make the money.
Yeah. Like we've had, I mean, I can think of two revolutions that the music industry has had. Like they kind of, everybody was grouped together and you're selling records, and then it moved to like things go to the radio. But then like when that shakes everything up, everything moved towards streaming. And as soon as streaming happened, that was its own corporatist like movement. So, and like these patterns show up like over and over, where these companies that are in the positions that they're in, if they're ready to pivot, which they should be because they have the most money and flexibility, they can jump on these trends. And like Spotify, I feel like did a lot of harm because they have devalued things. And I am not an expert at all when it comes to music, but you get to these points where they can start being the distributor, but since nobody knows what's going on, they start making these rules before anybody has an idea. And the same thing happened with the internet, and it's happening with AI. You make these decisions, and even if they feel right, they're definitely benefiting corporations most, and likely adding to the prey aspects of all of us. And I don't know how to fix that, because it's
kind of cyclical.
Yeah.
It's a cyclical thing, because we address it and then they find a way in, and it's the yin yang. That's the concept of yin yang. Like it's the good and the evil, if I'm going to blatantly black and white it. But it's a moving, I wish I had a GIF of it, because what it is it's a moving spiral, and the opposite points, the black in the white and the white, are supposed to be expanding to become the new one. And it's just it's an ever swirling, ever changing one into the other.
Eventually the one becomes the producer that
Yeah, or at least like if it's not down to individuals or companies, it's just the big guy will find a way to get back into the local scene, and then it becomes the big guy again. And it's just, that's what happens. McDonald's was just two dudes selling burgers at one point, right?
Yeah.
Like so it's interesting. Humans, I heard this in some anime. I think it was Hunter x Hunter. I don't remember, but humans, we don't live, our lifespan isn't short enough just to procreate, and it's not long enough to actually learn anything, it seems. Yeah. So we don't live like animals where our job is just to survive and make more of us.
Yeah.
But we don't live long enough yet to quite hold on to for a generation to really change things, because the new generation has to learn the old lessons every time.
I'm curious as to if AI is going to change that. I mean, it will. Like, we get to a point where like one click of the button is going to like massively change everything that humans couldn't have coordinated, like in 1,000 words and 1,000 textbooks.
Yeah, I mean, it will be. That's kind of an interesting point because it will be because of all those humans beforehand. The entirety of human history will be able will enable that, which is a good thing. I always joke that, whenever someone doesn't have like an answer to something, like, well, we do have these magic glowing rectangles with all of human knowledge on them.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah, like the potential is there to take one of those good steps. The obvious thing that sci-fi has taught us is that they're going to be bad steps, but I mean, it's a really interesting tool, and lifespan is a really interesting way to look at it because, yeah, we like the people voting for Reagan didn't think about what they were passing down. I mean, not all of them. They didn't project what was going to happen. They didn't realize that the economy was going to do what it did, and so you can't call them mustache twirlers. But like, we have what we have, so we have to kind of take steps to rectify.
Yeah, and maybe they did know what they were doing as far as like, my kids will be set, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But what they didn't realize is that they were teaching their kids that's what you do.
Yeah.
So it becomes this
take
filter.
Your piece of the pie or what have you.
Right. So another example of that, it's a bit of a dark example, but generational trauma, right? Like if your grandparents abused your parents, their kids, their parents are like, well, I know that's bad. They know that's bad. But if it's all you know,
yeah,
it
might be trauma. It might be abuse light, but it's still there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so if that's what you learn, that just perpetuates.
Yeah.
So it does take
nobody wants to look back and say my childhood was bad, but you have to do that if you say I want to make my child life good, and to do that I have to weed the garden.
And that's a tough one because it feels like you're dishonoring your parents.
Yeah.
By being like, oh, my childhood had a lot of holes in it, but everyone's does. Parents don't. I mean, think about it. We, in general, we have no idea what the fuck we're doing at any given moment.
Yeah.
So, our parents were the same way. We hold the illusion that they had the answers and had everything figured out for us.
It's definitely something you like when you have a kid. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, right, they were humans, because I'm looking at this thing and like, I'm like, what the fuck do I? How do I manage this?
He keeps taking his shirt off, but I don't want him to. What do I do? But that's really it. So it's, we keep expecting a generation to somehow fix things, or we're blaming a generation, but it's going to take a generation to just, like you said, Alex, just take a step back. Takes a generation to chill the fuck out for a second, objectively look at this stuff and go, whoa, all right, we're not going to be able to fix all this. It's a big knot to untangle.
Yeah.
But, if we teach our
kids
to have strong fingers.
Oh, yeah. I think that's what the millennials are kind of doing naturally. We were overwhelmed by 9/11 and the internet and fucking like economic crisis after economic crisis, and it's just like, and
it seems like millennials were the first generation to get told to follow your dreams and then just run headlong into a wall.
Because we got to see a glimpse of the tail end of the golden age. So we were all like kids, and it was like, wow, what a magical world. And then
there's a cliff.
Yeah, oh, I lost my thread. That's okay. Yeah, we were kind of told like this everything is available. We saw the things that were available. We saw things moving up. And, like I watch media from like 2000, like right before 9/11, and was like, holy shit, like, what a hopeful, wonderful world. Like, I just watched A Knight's Tale. It's beautiful, and it was like months before 9/11, and it's just like, man, this is like where we were heading. Like, what did we lose because of the darkness that just fucking fell on us? So all of us have to kind of unpack that, and now that we're doing it, we're getting to a place where, like, yeah, we're taking a step back. Like, what did we lose? What could we bring back to the table? And I think that is where a lot of art is coming from. We're seeing really beautiful things that are kind of, we've been dark for a long time. We want to kind of turn around. We want the Tim Burton Batman, and not necessarily the Christopher Nolan.
Right. Absolutely. That's something I've noticed a bit in. I don't know if you do, but I'm an anime watcher. I love anime very much, and
I haven't got
a lot
into
of
it.
them.
I always like the synopses, but
sure, yeah, they're great. It's some pretty good storytelling most of the time, but a lot of them, I've seen enough different animes, different series, to have seen this pattern. They all contain a nuclear-esque explosion at some point. And I think that's just part of, and I think that's the part of art that you're talking about is Japan is unpacking that giant tragedy that we did as Americans. Yeah. We should never forget that we did that. But I think that's part of, like you just talked about, the art is, even if it's subconscious, they might not be consciously doing this, but subconsciously they're just unpacking that massive scale of destruction that fell upon them at one point.
Yeah, I don't know how we would cope with that. Like how America would cope with being deprived of power, because they were heavy hitters.
Well,
while they were part of the Axis.
I was gonna make the joke that the only reason England was okay, right? Because they're like, to the last man, and they were fine, is because Hitler couldn't nuke them. Because Japan did the same thing. They're like, to the last man. We're like, you sure?
Yeah.
Right. We can make that happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and like if you think of like America, just like the mass that it is, like both geographically and politically, like we're the first world country. Like, what if we lost all of it? Like, what if we become subservient? Like, what does that do to us? And it's a lot.
Like, there's a series. It's rather recent. About if the Allies had lost World War II. What is it called? Is it Man in the
High Castle?
High Castle. Yep, Man in the High Castle. I haven't seen it, but I know that's the premise. Yeah, so there is an exploration of this idea somewhere. Yeah.
All right, guys.
That was fascinating.
We're hitting the 2-hour mark, so we're gonna have to start wrapping up because it's gonna start getting choppy. I'm guessing we're gonna have to do another one of these.
I would love that. This has been great. Yeah. Can I get both of your like personal TikTok things?
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That'd be great.
We can throw those into the email if that makes things easier.
Perfect.
I'll just send them over from the Prometheus one because then I can share.
Okay.
This went exactly how I was hoping it went, so that's awesome.
This was lovely.